The logistics. War. The war on the border was a war of fire, but the war in Tibet was a war of ice and physics. The People's Liberation Army, PLA, had a massive numerical advantage, but they had a fatal bottleneck. The Qinghai-Tibet Railway. This single-track railway was the highest in the world, crossing the Tangala Pass at 5,072 meters. It was the only artery capable of moving the PLA's heavy armor. The 55-ton Type 99A main battle tanks and the massive DF-41 ICBM transporter erector launchers from the industrial heartland of China to the Indian border. The highways were too treacherous for heavy convoys in winter, and air transport could not sustain a mechanized division. If the railway held, India would be crushed by the sheer weight of Chinese steel. If the railway broke, the PLA forces in Ladakh and Arunachal would starve. Kabir's target wasn't a general or a bunker. It was a cooling pipe. The engineering of vulnerability. The Qinghai-Tibet Railway was an engineering marvel built on a nightmare. Permafrost. In the summer, the frozen ground of the plateau threatened to thaw, turning into a swamp that would buckle the tracks and derail trains. To combat this, Chinese engineers had installed thermosiphons, thousands of metal pipes driven deep into the ground. These were passive heat exchangers filled with liquid ammonia. They pulled heat out of the ground and radiated it into the cold air, keeping the soil permanently frozen. The system was automated, controlled by a SCADA, Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition, network that monitored ground temperatures every millisecond. Kabir checked his watch. It was a ruggedized analog piece, mechanical, with no Bluetooth or GPS to hack, 0200 hours, the wolf hour again. He stood up, leaving a few yuan on the table, and walked out into the freezing night. The streets were patrolled by the People's Armed Police, PAP, wearing the Type 07 digital camouflage and carrying QBZ-95 bullpup assault rifles. But the real danger wasn't the guns. It was the cameras. The Panopticon China's Skynet and Sharp Eyes surveillance projects had blanketed Lhasa with millions of cameras equipped with gait recognition software. You didn't need to show your face to be identified. The computer knew you by the way you walked, the length of your stride, the slump of your shoulders. Kabir walked with a pebble inside his right shoe. It was a simple, painful tradecraft trick. The sharp stone forced him to limp slightly, altering his gait just enough to throw off the algorithmic biometrics. To the AI watching from the server farm in Chengdu, he was an old man with a bad hip, not a Tier 1 operator in peak physical condition. He moved toward the outskirts of the city, toward the marshalling yards of the Lhasa West Railway Station. The air smelled of diesel and ozone. Through the chain-link fence, topped with motion-sensing razor wire, he saw them. Rows of flatbed rail cars stretching for kilometers. They were loaded with the PLA's fist, the ZBD-04A infantry fighting vehicles, and the terrifying PCL-181 truck-mounted howitzers. This was the second wave, the reinforcement force destined for the chicken's neck. The infiltration Kabir didn't cut the fence. The wire was fiber optic. Cutting it would trip a silent alarm. Instead, he approached a drainage culvert half filled with freezing sludge. He slid into the muck, the smell of sewage and industrial runoff filling his nose. He crawled for 300 meters, breathing through a filtration scarf, until he saw the grate that led up into the maintenance sector. He emerged behind a stack of shipping containers. He was inside the perimeter. His objective was a small, nondescript concrete blockhouse near the main switch points. This was the thermal control node, TCN, for the Lhasa sector. He moved like a shadow, utilizing the blind spots of the spinning LiDAR sensors mounted on the guard towers. He reached the door of the blockhouse. It was secured with a magnetic lock and a keypad. Kabir didn't try to pick it. He pulled out a cloner, the device the size of a deck of cards. He held it over the keypad. The device didn't hack the code. It read the thermal residue left by the fingers of the last maintenance technician who had entered. The keys 1, 4, 7, and 9 were slightly warmer than the others. He guessed the sequence, 1 to 9 to 7 to 4. Red light, 9 to 7 to 4 to 1. Red light, 4 to 1 to 7 to 9. Green light. The magnet disengaged with a heavy thunk.